I doubt it this week. I'm Armand Diaz with your forecast for the week of August 12th, 2019, and I have to say that this full moon week is full of energy that has a lot to do with independence, a lot to do with individuality, and very, very little to do with patience. There's an ironic sort of twist to this week. We have the full moon in Aquarius, which is coming off of the Uranus station on Sunday, the 11th, which really emphasizes the Uranian individualistic, freedom oriented aspects of this coming week. Uranus sets the tone on Sunday. The full moon, the moon in Aquarius from Tuesday through Thursday, amplifies it. Uranus squares Uranus on Friday. And we have aspects then that will help us to constructively take this sort of bright, energetic, inspirational energy that runs through the week and try to find ways to make it more, let's say, practical applications. And that is essentially the theme of this week, you see. We started at the Leo new moon a couple of weeks ago, and it was that whole path with heart thing. Follow your heart, follow where you need to go from a deep inner place. And so we've worked out over the last couple of weeks, well, what are some of the practicalities involved in that? And now we're kind of coming to a point of saying, okay, well, what are those restraints and what are our constraints and what is the need for freedom? The strategy this week is to really get out of your own way. And that means, though, doing your thing and then seeing how others react and seeing what you can do with them, because we don't operate in a vacuum. And it might be, especially as the week begins on Monday with the Capricorn moon and some Saturnian, Plutonian, Capricornian stuff that we deal with we really deal with it all the time. This kind of very earthy energy, this very practical energy, there's very much this responsibility orientation on Monday could be a little irksome. Uranus and Jupiter stationing to change direction on Sunday. Hope, enthusiasm, excitement, freedom. Keep saying freedom because it's so important. And then here's this Capricornian responsibility, work, what you have to do. It's not necessarily the most harmonious kind of feel, is it? There's this sort of Jupiter and Uranus are encouraging this, beyond limits freedom, the ability to think creatively, the sort of, astral level kind of connections. Whereas, Capricorn is all about dealing with, very practical, earthy responsibilities. You don't necessarily want to. You've got that. You're excited about an idea. You're inspired. You want to do great things, and then you've got to do the laundry. The integration of these different themes can be very tricky. It's you have to learn to appreciate the joy of grinding the pigment and mixing it with the oils and all of those things. As much as taking the brush and having free movement on the canvas. You've got to deal with the earthy stuff, and then it's the basis for those of us who have chosen to incarnate on this plane. You got to take care of the earthy stuff in order to get to that other stuff, the more open, the greater inspiration, spirit kind of things. You got to take care of the body. You've got to shelter the thing and feed it and clothe it and all of that in order to be able to do some of these other things that can be, at least this week, a little bit more exciting. There's plenty of times, of course, when the body is exciting enough by itself. But right this week, we're very much thinking we're kind of up there in the grand atmosphere, and it's not so much a earthy kind of emphasis for most of us. But on Monday, we do have to deal with a bit of that. I mean, you'll have to feed yourself and clothe yourself all week long, but on Monday, it'd be irksome. Just the thought of going to work on Monday morning might be a little bit annoying, or you're have something to do, some little responsibility, and it's like, oh, I hate having to do that. It's that sort of feeling that's very likely to be prominent on Monday. So, and that's kind of what we have to deal with throughout the week. Although I think that once the moon gets into Aquarius on Tuesday, we find ourselves not necessarily right, not necessarily in our bodies, not necessarily on the ground. Yeah, there's gonna be some reminders. The moon squares Uranus in Taurus, but that's almost like an encouragement of you can go beyond the boundaries of the physical. Uh, the Ironically, this week is very good with this Aquarian full moon energy. It's very, very good for group activities. It's very, very good for social, political types of things. But it's not that great for cooperation on a more local level. We may really prefer to work alone, especially Monday. But I think with the Iranian energy, I mean, really flowing through the entire week, we're very likely to want to spend. It's not like we want to be alone, like, go away, you're bothering me. It's like I'm doing my thing and I don't really want any distractions. So, at worst, this could wind up in a kind of like, somebody who, the classic phrase, loves humanity but hates people. But, in general, I think what happens is that it's easy to get on the same page with folks about, grand ideals. But then you get a little, how do we actually interact and how do we relate becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So we have this kind of dual-sided thing that in principle we agree, but don't come over here and ask me to borrow my stapler or something like that, because it's like I'm busy doing my thing. So finding that cooperation, finding that a connection could be difficult. It eases up quite a bit on Saturday and Sunday, but if you're in a traditional work environment, that might not really be all that helpful. So the energy of this week could be very much one of everybody maybe sharing the grand vision, but not necessarily having the same kind of sense of how to get through the day and how to deal with specific issues. This full moon is very tied into Venus. Right? Venus meets with the sun, and Venus is very, very close to the full moon. Is very, very the moon will oppose Venus essentially at the full moon. And partnership asteroid Juno is also quite busy this week. So things at the full moon may come to light about relationships. This might be a time when we begin to recognize what's going on in our relationships. It's maybe a time when we start to see potential for something new happening in the area of relationship. It might be the time where we sort of hit a turning point. If you've been sort of moving along and not quite sure where things are, you might hit a decisive turning point at the full moon, and then aspects to Juno later on throughout the weekend sort of suggest that maybe you can sort of sort out what it all means as you go along. So partnership and relationship are quite prominent this week as well. Now on Friday, Mercury, who's now out of his shadow of his retrograde, just in case you were waiting for something, now he's out of the shadow of his retrograde, Mercury will square Uranus. Now, Mercury is in Leo, where things tend to be very intuitive and spontaneous anyway, squaring Uranus in Taurus. So brilliant ideas intuitively show up. This is not a kind of you work through things a little bit at a time. This is the light bulb over the head phenomenon. You just get it. It's a wonderful energy in many, many respects. I think that the biggest challenge is to find ways to communicate your insights to others in a way that they'll understand. You sort of see the whole thing at once. It's like you go into a room and you turn the light bulb on. You see everything at once. And as illuminating as that is for you, getting that to somebody else in a way that they can work with it, well, there are challenges involved in that a lot of the time. It's not a very step-by-step, it's not an air kind of energy. It's very much fire energy, very much spark of insight type of thing. It's wonderful, but it's gonna be a little hard to communicate. At this time, the moon is in Pisces, and that should make for a pretty nice weekend, among other things. If you're gonna share your ideas, I mean, having the Piscean feel to it is pretty good. You could also use this energy for meditation, all kinds of trance work. It's a trippy sort of atmosphere. I think that coming off of the full moon, give it a couple of days, and you'll feel a little grounded enough, or I don't know if grounded is the right word, but you'll feel ready for a more adventurous kind of serendipitous trip type of thing. Saturday, same thing. The energy certainly evens out a little bit more. The moon is void on Saturday night, void moon in Pisces. Again, that's a really nice, the moon is still close enough to being full. There's a lot of energy there. So Saturday night ought to be quite nice. Sunday, the moon goes into Aries. And here we have a kind of a return to a little bit of more of a work orientation as the moon gets ready to square Saturn. It's certainly a more active doing things. It's a little bit like, you always have activity at the full moon. That's just part of it. You sort of can't help yourself. Full moons tend to be reactive, but in Aquarius it'll be a little bit more cerebral. So right around midweek, the full moon on Wednesday, we're not really talking about that much of emotionally out of control, but we're also not being all that active in a physical way. Then the Pisces moon and the Mercury Uranus aspect, well, that will make Friday a very mentally active time, but again, it's not necessarily that physically active. Then Sunday, by the time we get to Sunday and the moon goes into Aries, well, then it could really be time to do some exercise. It could be time for a little bit of friendly competition. That's a good thing to do. Keep it friendly, but the competition is a good thing with the moon in Aries, and also a little bit more of a focus on work. Of course, Aries is a sign that, again, encourages independence. I don't really understand why Uranus isn't more closely associated with the sign of Aries. I think that might be, if not, it's, well, let's not get into a big discussion of that. But again, that independence energy this time shifts from something that is more cerebral, idea-oriented, into something that is much more physical, active, and direct. It's quite a week. It's quite a week. It should be pretty good for socializing. It might be good for romance for some folks. It's probably, it'll keep a close eye on what happens in the collective this week. There's a lot of stuff going on that will trigger energies in the collective, particularly Mars in Leo going over Donald Trump's ascendant, and his Mars, he's having his Mars return, which usually infuses a lot of energy at or immediately afterwards. You'll see this more towards the weekend. But it's something to watch because you do see a spike in activity from quarters where there's quite a bit of activity coming anyway. All right, we'll be back next week for the following forecast. See you then.